This is the Louie Tee Network.
In the lab room.
10 minutes or less. Carolina Panthers.
Welcome, you are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thanks for joining me here on the program, 10 minutes or less, Carolina Panthers. You know what to do. Cue that clock up. Boop. Let's get it started. Season rewind for the Carolina Panthers. So you look at this season, in 2013 was huge for the Panthers. It was huge for Ron Rivera. It was huge for a number of reasons. One, Cam Newton came off of somewhat, and I don't like to call it a sophomore slump. It was more of a sophomore malaise. And they struggled offensively. It didn't look like it did in his rookie season. And so you had questions there. Was Ron Rivera going to be back? That was probably the big elephant in the room. So there were a lot of things that needed to be answered going into 2013. Well, they came out of the gate and they laid an egg in week one, and they followed that up with an even bigger egg in week two versus the Buffalo Bills. Now, week one, 12-7 loss to Seattle, the eventual Super Bowl champions. You don't feel bad about that, but you do feel bad about only scoring 7 points. A game that you probably should have won if you don't fumble going in for the game-winning score late in that ball game. But look, that's nor here nor there. You're 0-2, and I'm thinking to myself, Ron is about to get fired. Then you win right before the bye, and you probably got the worst possible bye week in the National Football League with that week 4 bye. It really doesn't get much worse than that. But maybe it came at the right time. You come off the bye, you're 1-2, and you lose that first game out of the bye to Arizona, and it's bad. It's 22-6 bad, and you're like, oh, man, Ron, you about to get fired, man. You about to get fired, Ron. And Ron said, the hell I am. And the next thing you know, the Panthers run off 7 straight, 11 out of 12, and they finish up the season at 12-4, your winners of the NFC South Division. And they were playing some excellent football down the stretch. Defense was coming up big. Offense was doing just enough. And so they were working in unison. They got to the postseason. It was their first time. It was expected. They ran into a bully, and they just weren't ready. But this is a really good Carolina Panthers football team that is predicated on their defense. And they led the league in sacks. 60 sacks? Wowzers! That's an astronomical number. That's ridiculous. And so they get after the quarterback. Their linebacking corps, one of the best in the league. So their front seven is out of this world. Where they have a weakness, where there's a weak link in that chain is in that secondary. We'll talk about that here in a second. But Panthers finish up 12-4, save the job of Ron Rivera. He's got a contract extension now, so he'll be around for a little while. So things are on the up and up. Now it's time for Cam to get paid. You know it's Cam. You know it's Cam. Well, oh, damn, it's time to pay. It's time to pay. Yes, indeed. So look for Cam to be getting that contract extension here shortly as well. But now you fast forward to this Panthers team in the 2014 offseason. You look at their free agents, and man, is there a bunch of them or what? It's a mouthful. I'll just read them here quickly. So you look at Derek Anderson, Jimmy Clausen, Ted Ginn Jr., Dominic Hickson, Brandon LaFell, he's restricted, Ben Hartsock, Jordan Gross, Bruce Campbell, Jeff Hartgardner, Chris Scott, he's restricted, Travell Wharton, Gary Williams, Greg Hardy, Colin Cole, Jordan Sen, Dan Connor, Jason Williams, Drayton Florence, Captain Munnerlyn, Quentin Michael, Mike Mitchell, Graham Gano, Byron Bell, restricted, fullback Richie Brockle, restricted as well. So that's a huge list. 24 to be exact, the second most in the league in terms of free agents. So there's a huge number. And when you have as much success as the Panthers had a season ago, you want to bring your stuff back. If it's not broken, don't fix it. So you want to bring a lot of these guys back. Problem is, you can't. You can't. So what you need to do is you need to pick and choose. Much like Halloween candy, you need to pick and choose which of these free agents are going to be Carolina Panthers moving forward. Here are the guys that I feel like need to be back in Carolina in this upcoming season. You look at Ted Ginn Jr. I felt like he played his way into a long-term deal with this Panthers team. He was an X factor last year, special teams game, as well as receiving. He needs to be back in Carolina. Also, Brandon LaFell is a restricted free agent. He's your stuff. Hold on to your stuff. Bring Brandon LaFell back in the fold in Carolina. You look at another guy that you should bring back, Jordan Gross. Does Jordan want to play? If Jordan wants to play, I say you keep him at the left tackle position. However, his running mate on the left side, Travell Wharton, I think you need to start bringing some young life into that offensive line on that left side. Both of those guys are up there in age. Wharton is 32, Gross is 33. If Jordan wants to come back, you bring him back, but I think you need to get someone in there at that left guard position and let Travell Wharton walk away at left guard. You look at Jeff Hartgardner. Here's another guy. If you've got a guy that can play multiple positions like Jeff Hartgardner can, you need to hold on to him. He can play 3 positions on the offensive line. I don't see why you don't bring him back on the cheap and keep him there as an emergency center as well as backup left and right guard. You look at another guy, Captain Munnerlyn. I love Cap. He's a little small, feisty corner that's going to fight tooth and nail. It's not going to back down from anybody. You saw that in the NFC divisional round game against the 49ers. I like him. I say you bring him back. Do you want him starting out on the edge? I don't really know about that. But I like Captain Munnerlyn nonetheless. Come on back. You look at the next guy, Mike Mitchell. Thought he was the heart and soul of your defense last season. I don't see how you don't bring Mike Mitchell back. I think it is imperative that you bring Mike Mitchell back. As long as Mike hasn't had his head explode and doesn't think that he's worth a tremendous number, if he's being reasonable, if the dollars make sense, bring Mike Mitchell back. You look at Byron Bell. That's your stuff. You know the rule on homegrown product. If it's your stuff and you don't have anything better in-house, bring it back. If you've got something better to replace Byron Bell, knock yourself out. But I like Byron Bell. He's your stuff. And unless you've got something better, you can't let go of your stuff. Bring Byron Bell back. Which takes us to the elephant in the room. The only guy in Carolina right now that could warrant you to use the franchise tag. Of course, I'm speaking of one and only Greg Hardy. Now, what to do with Greg Hardy? Because you got a lot of money tied up on this defensive line as it is. Spent some money on some draft picks. You know Charles Johnson is getting a huge deal over there. So what are you going to do? You can't invest but so much money in Greg Hardy. And to franchise him, you're talking $11.6 million, 11.2 something in that realm. It's a lot of money to be investing in that defensive line. But can you go without Greg Hardy? I don't think that's an option. You got to bring this guy back. Whether it's franchise, long-term deal, something, you got to bring him back. I feel like it's a must that you bring Greg Hardy back to this football team. So now we go to team needs. And for me, looking at this Carolina Panthers team, you've got several needs, and you're working with about $15.2 million. Now, again, you know that this is a fluid number. It can change. The ceiling on the cap is supposed to change. It looks like it's going to be elevated. So there'll be some extra change to play with. Keep in mind, I just ran off about 7 or 8 names that you need to bring back onto this roster. So you're going to spend a lot of your money bringing your own stuff back. But looking forward to team needs. The first one on the list is wide receiver, okay? You didn't go and draft any receivers last year. You bypassed that in last year's draft. This is an extremely deep draft at the receiver position. You need to draft yourself a top-tier wide receiver. The first pick that you make in this year's draft needs to be a receiver. Steve Smith is hanging on. You know why he's hanging on for dear life? Because he wants to pass the torch. You know why he hasn't passed the torch yet? Because that guy isn't on the roster yet. Draft yourself a receiver that is a difference maker so Steve can pass that torch off and move on into the sun. Now, you need some help on the offensive line. I said, I think you can upgrade guard. That's something you need to do in the draft, however, as well as tight end. I think you could use another tight end, but that's something that you need to do in the draft. Here's the big one, though. You need cornerback help. I like my beef up front fresh. I like my beef fresh. And you went and got fresh beef last year in the draft. Okay? Now, corners, I don't like my corners fresh. I like my corners well seasoned. That means I like veterans out there, guys I can trust that have seen all the route combinations and knows what's going on out there. You need some seasoned veterans. You got a lot of young boys out there trying to learn on the fly. That's how you get beat. That's the reason you got beat last year, is because those young boys, they played well all year long, got into the postseason, played against some tough oppositions, and they couldn't get it done. You need some seasoned help. There are a lot of good corners. And look, you don't need to do anything in free agency other than bring your guys back and go out on the market and get yourself a corner. There are a lot of good corners out there. If the Packers want a trip and don't re-sign Sam Shields, go get Sam Shields. If the Colts want a trip, don't re-sign Vontae Davis, go get Vontae Davis. There are a lot of guys out there. Tremaine Brock from the 49ers. Another guy, Will Blackman from the Jaguars. There are a lot of quality corners out there that can upgrade your secondary. Don't be afraid to go sniffing around the market. Find yourself a corner. You need to get you some seasoned help out there in that secondary. That's my time. That's been the Carolina Panthers in 10 minutes or less.
10 minutes or less. Like the content? Want more? Sub up.
In the lab room.